Okay, good morning, everyone. The Victoria Arts Council respectfully acknowledges the Lekwungen-speaking people whose traditional territory we operate within, and the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and Saanich First Nations whose historical relationship with this land and diverse culture continue to this day. We raise our hands in gratitude for the ancestors, matriarchs, hereditary leaders, and the artists from these lands. We give thanks for the privilege of living and working here. My name is Kagan McFadden, and I'm the Executive Director of the Victoria Arts Council. And I'm here with Cass McConkey, Program Coordinator, and together we are co-leads of the Creative Mornings chapter in Victoria. So this is exciting. For the last year and a half, we've done this all via Zoom. So this is our first dry land outing, as it were. And we're so grateful to Studio 531 Architects for inviting us in for this talk in their beautiful office. If only everyone online could see how great this looks. And the coffee, thank you very much. So I will pass over to Cass, and then you'll hear from me in a second to the guest.
Thanks. All right, so welcome to Creative Mornings. Oops, sorry. So February's theme is touch. When we open ourselves to the ineffable, what cannot be transmitted through words. Touch emerges as a language unto itself. The grit of the soil under our bare feet, the clay slip of a potter's wheel, the sun-warmed fur of a beloved pet. These sensations can be healing. How will you stay in contact with the electric matter that keeps us alive? What will pass through your hands? Our Lisbon chapter chose this month's exploration of touch, and Emma Lopez illustrated Thank you. MailChimp, Creative Mornings' official global partner for marketing. How many entrepreneurs do we have in the room? Our friends at MailChimp & Co. have got you covered with a few tips that can help you put your best foot forward for your next pitch presentation. A pitch desk is more than a way to bring in new business. It's also a way of sharing your vision, who you are, what you value, what you do, and how you do it.
And so I have a little space because probably just rest. I'm tired too. Oh my God. It's been a long week.
Yeah. Did you know the #1 way Creative Mornings people hear about Creative Mornings is through their friends? This month, we invite you to bring a friend, whether they've never heard of Creative Mornings, have been away for a long time, but are excited to get back, or are Creative Mornings regular but just need a push from a friend. Get them to tag along. Thank you to the City of Victoria and the CRD for their continued support. And thank you to HCMA. HCMA is an architecture firm that designs buildings, grounds, and shared experiences that connect people.
To do things like this that I want to do. So it's not that I'm working too much.
So we're from the Victoria Arts Council, and we'd like to share a current exhibition. This image that acts as a survey of contemporary photographers working locally with the aim of exploring the historical tropes of the medium. A focused collection of traditional exploratory approaches to image making are on view, as selected by VAC's Executive Director, Kagan McFadden. This image that will be on until this Sunday. All right, so opening March 4th is our International Women's Day show, Leveling Up, Breaking Down. The show will run from March 4th to the 31st and will feature work from 10 artists. We'll have programming each weekend, including an opening event, a public health workshop, an artist and conversation event, panel discussion, and ending with our March Creative Mornings presentation on corruption. So in addition to here, we have a number of community satellite galleries around town, including the Victoria International Airport and 5 Greater Victoria public libraries. You can visit our website for more information on locations and who is showing. One of our satellite galleries is the Dock Center for Social Impact, and on now is Josh Franklin's A Home Without Innocence. An evening of art, music, and community conversation is happening there tonight. Josh will speak about his exhibition and be joined by Nick Sander, the Executive Director of the Men's Therapy Center, who will speak on the work they're doing in the community. There will be a silent auction for one of Franklin's pieces, alongside a raffle to raise funds to support men who need therapeutic aid along their path to healing. Josh's work and the evening's conversation aim at generating community awareness and dialogue towards ending the cycle of abuse. So please visit the doc's website to reserve a spot. And I'll now pass it over to Kagan to introduce our speaker.
Thanks, Cass. It's always a marathon just to get started. Okay, so David Martinello is a multidisciplinary artist who investigates the characteristics of wood. His work is motivated by the development of techniques as a way to celebrate wood's influence as muse with its agency. Martinello ventures to activate the legacy of wood so that its tactility can behave as a tool for contemplation, a way to identify with the environment and materiality of all things. Martinello's practice is informed by a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Queen's University and years building furniture with his company Alternative Woodworks. Martinello has curated several shows in BC, owned a gallery, and his art has been shown across Canada with the sculpture permanently displayed at the Cowichan Community Centre. Martinello's piece, Pliant, is on view at the Studio 531, has been for a few months now. Pliant draws upon wood's expressive attributes in conjunction with the particulars of the window gallery at Studio 531 Architects to flex between organic and geometric lines. Shaped by wood's gestures, the sculpture invites viewers to consider how wood's essence is crafted into the framework of our buildings. This inspires narrative for all materials and has Pliant use its form to have the space respond to it. So David's gonna speak for 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. The floor includes our digital platform. So thank you, David.
So to begin with, I'd like to thank the Victoria Arts Council, Studio 531 Architects, and CreativeMornings for hosting this talk. And thank you all for coming, those here and online. I'm quite excited to share, as this is a culmination of a lot of work and thought in the making of Pliant, which has been here in the Window Gallery since November 7th. For those of you online that haven't seen Pliant, I'll start by sharing some of my favorite pictures of it. I especially love the ones that are all moody and taken at night with the hanging light bulbs. So this one here is in my studio, and so I could really stand back from it. And okay, and then this is in my studio as I was building it. Another one, I just like the lights in behind it. And then here's in the window. Again, here in the window. And the ones at night, which, yeah, add a certain amount of character. Pliant fell into place when I was invited to work with the Victoria Arts Council satellite space here at Studio 531 Architects. I took it on as a real challenge because I'd actually been trying to come up with an idea that could speak to the venue for some time. It was a bit of a struggle to figure it out, but I'm very happy with the results because of the insights that I've gathered from making Pliant. The sculpture really speaks to my exploration as an artist. Having said that, before I go any further, it may be helpful for me to read my artist statement to give Pliant some context. In my practice, I leverage the mechanics of meaning between art and craft to investigate the characteristics of wood. My work evaluates wood's materiality to consider the effects of its legacy within the infrastructure of our lives. As a Canadian, I've been taught the symbolic power of a tree in a landscape, but as a woodworker, my eye is trained to see beyond a tree's circumstance and appraise it as timber with an ability to come to something else. A living tree has all the belonging it needs, but once fallen, its potential can be interpreted into such disparate things as firewood, construction material, and fine craft work. Working with wood's capabilities, I'm in awe of how its embedded gestures can inform the impact it has. They motivate me to develop techniques as a way to celebrate and muse with its lyrical attributes. With a multidisciplinary approach, along with conventional manipulations of wood, I work to discern insights into the tactility of its essence. Exploring the intrinsic properties of wood, my art highlights aspects of the medium that are often taken for granted or overlooked. Relying on the innate relationship we have with wood, I engage with its agency for it to behave as a connective node to the environment and a means for philosophical examination and identifying with the materiality of all things. So before I go too much more into the theoretical side of my art, I'll first share the specifics of my process in making client, because this is really speaks to the heart of the project. As a woodworker, I first came up with the angular assembly of the 2x4s to bounce off their architectural assertion of the seismic beam. They were painted white to match the beam, which also conveniently references the white walls of the gallery setting. So a bit of a call and response, while also considering the context of the base. Next, it was pretty intuitive for me to want to contrast that with some organic lines, and so the idea of client was formed. The big task was to find the wood, and although I have a sizable collection of slabs and logs, I knew that having a whole bunch of thinner branches to build something akin to lattice work, rather than timber framing, would keep it airy with the size of sculpture needed to engage the space. Thankfully, a friend was clearing a grove of maple for a paddock, so I was able to pick out the most interesting branches from a large and already dry pile. So the next pictures are of said pile. And yeah, it was a really hot day, and so all of the dirt, stuck to the sweat, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I crammed it in as much as I could with the time that I had. It was quite an experience gathering the wood for pliant. I was overwhelmed and excited by the task, but at the same time, I became very grounded in the process with the way that I engaged the landscape. Time was taken to touch the branches with great intent, considering their legacy, past and future tense, especially as I worked beside the tree stumps from which the branches came. The tangibility of this study was only strengthened as I split and assembled the branches. This is my idea of fun because of all the adventure that comes from playing with the characteristics of wood. Musing with the found gestures while reflecting from where the wood came from, imagining the circumstances that made the wood look like it did, including that within the spruce 2x4s. I saw the pieces of wood as having expressive qualities. Shaped by the wood's inflections, in conjunction with the particulars of the window gallery, pliant's composition flexes purposefully between organic and geometric lines. The whimsical, contrasted with the constructed tones, was an invitation for viewers to think about how wood's essence is crafted into the framework of our buildings, with the added hope that it had the effect of inspiring consideration for all the surrounding materials. This is where looking at pliant in my practice becomes an exercise in contemplation because of how an empirical understanding of wood can be used as an intuitive shortcut to begin exploring more esoteric thoughts of materiality. Pliant relates to the space by using our innate understanding of wood to think about the concessions of the circumstance. Aside from the nature of wood, consider the sand and heat that was needed to make the glass, or the mining and smelting and forming needed to make the steel beam, or the plants and animals and eons needed to make a resource to extract and modify to make the paint. And then there's the fact that materials needed to be transported and installed, amongst a myriad of other things. A relationship forms to the physicality of the environment that causes one to consider the intent that makes up everything. This is a real trip to think about, and it gets into Taoist meditation and drives me a bit batty if I invest too much time in such a tactile frame of mind. But it also gives me a sense of self, as the materiality of existence is touched upon. Thankfully, this all gets quite romantic, the imparting of thoughtful associations, and it also creates a sense of curiosity to account for what is not known about any given material. The process of commodification within the human experience can deliver meaningful connections. With an accountability and acknowledgement the constructed environment is perceived as behaving as an expression. Having said that, here's a few of my other works that draw on the materiality of wood as a way to modulate an awareness to our surroundings. The first is a centerpiece for a show that I had at Archive last spring called Forefound. It's a pretty literal pull on the idea of framework, with the tropes of green being used to speak to the legacy of wood. Ironically, the green paint in the 2x4s was a barrier for belonging after the show because the paint should not be burned. So I made a sculpture out of it, which is now in my yard for inspiration. Something similar will happen to the base of Pliant because the top is going to be placed in the forest behind my shop to see what will come with it. The next is a video, short video here. Pause it for a second. This video of the sculpting process of the 2x4s there, and it also showcases a couple more works from Forefound. So I'm going to dart back to photographs. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. I'm not going to engage too much into their details, including titles, even though the titles are so informative, just because it's more about kind of alluding to the motifs that act as tools for my investigation as an artist. Maybe I will use the titles here. It's informative. So this one's called Reposition, or Reposition. What happened?
Oh, what is?
There we go. So that's Reposition. And then this is Expounding. And this is Frame Factor. This one's kind of untitled, but just Twins. Fun project. This one's called Reverence. This one's The Practicality of Thought. And Matter of Figure. And The Mechanics of Meaning as Seen by Us. But back to Pliant and its specifics as it relates to an expression of wood and the window gallery here at Studio 531 Architects. To summarize, while installed here, Pliant played off the beam as an expression of the building to access the materiality of wood as a way to draw attention to how our lives are configured. Inspired by what I found in Pliant, I researched some architectural concepts to inform my understanding of how it engaged the space here. In my research, I found inspiring essays on subjects like the plasticity in architecture. This is where it's about articulating in space so that the capability of a material can transform itself by acquiring new spatial characteristics and dimensions through a process of identity redefinition. I found words that were associated with design like fragmentation, collusion, performative, networks, and parametric embedded in articles, which, with a bit of massaging, could be easily added to my vocabulary here as an artist about client. What I really found in my research was with how client relates to some architectural concepts is an affirmation for my line of investigation as an artist. Client, like all my art, is about working with an intent and consideration for a build as a gesture that incorporates what's found as part of a living formula, something with an essence. The other week, I was listening to Ideas on CBC with their article on the Sobe article. They asked the finalists to fill in the blank, art is. And I was grateful to think about art in such a pointed way. I came up with art is an assertion and enrichment of existence, which was helpful for me to define it in such terms. My next thought was about reaching out to touch upon something that could connect with this notion. And considering the inspired nature of this, my instinct was to look around for something made out of wood. Thank you.
So now's the portion where we can ask questions or offer comments, ask for any clarification. I'm going to start by just reminding us that we're here to talk about touch.
Yeah.
So can you say the word touch?
I did.
And say something about it?
I did.
You touch wood.
No, but it's so. As far as the touch, yeah, I'll clarify. It was about when I went to go get the branches.
Yeah.
I was very carefully, like, it was a very sensuous, or it was a very tactile experience. So the touch is there, and then it went further into its creation, and then splitting the wood was even more tactile and very, very involved with touch. And then the touch goes beyond that in terms of touching with spirit all the materials around it. So yeah, and then that just harkens back for me personally with the ability to be dramatic and touch wood in my speech. So it's about the physical connection that I had making the sculpture, but also the more ephemeral nature of touch in the way that it ignited thought surrounding it.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Did I hear that it was actually meant to be interactive, or did I misunderstand? Like,
it was more a call for you for the viewer to assess the way that it communicated with the building as a way to consider it and its surroundings, so that you then would interact with the world a bit differently, I suppose. And that's not for me to try to infer, a way to be, but it was more just a way to ask questions about how to be.
right.
So
Quite metaphysical.
yes,
I
yes, very
was
metaphysical.
thinking sort of like practical, like you could actually get in there and start moving stuff around.
No, it was
No.
more just it was the nature of wood and the innate connection that we have to it was more, that was a way to get your mind into it and then explore from it from there. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
We all have a very deep connection to wood.
Mhm.
We've all climbed a tree, and it's wood grain is so innately part of us that we'll even print it on plastic to apply it to other surfaces, right? And it goes beyond that too. Like all the wood around here used to be a tree that had a bird sitting on it, so we can relate to it with a lively essence that can carry yeah, easy access to a lot of other insights with other materials. Yeah.
Can you tell us when and how you were drawn to working with wood?
Yeah. It started before I can remember. I would co-opt everybody's arms to carry back bundles of sticks from walks. And then I don't know what happened with the sticks, but the whole family would come back with sticks. And then after that, I remember a moment, it's my first memory actually, where I was in Honeypot Nursery School and I was a little bit at odds of what to do. And the teachers gave me a hammer and nails and sent me into the corner where there was a bunch of offcuts and 2x4s. And then that kind of started everything. Yeah.
So it was when you were very young.
Yeah.
And what happened after the very young stage?
Yeah. What happened after that, it was always, high school, the hair starts growing and the leather tassels come out. And so I got into art. And then during high school, I helped build a chalet with my father. And so I learned how to be a carpenter then. And then when I went to University for Fine Arts, I was the shop hand and general maintenance for the school there. And then that's because what do you do with a fine arts degree? I went into construction after that because I had that experience with the fine arts degree and what the school provided me in terms of summer employment as well. So and it circled back to just being an artist and informed the way that I was an artist during school and kept going from there. And then after graduation, I traveled around as a carpenter and as a cabinet maker and furniture maker. And then in 2006, I should say that I stopped making art after graduation for about 10 years. So in 2006, graduated in 99, I started Alternative Works, and then which is my furniture making company. And that kept me going for a bunch of years and still is going, making things that way. And then, so I looked at the furniture with an artistic point of view. And at this point, it's a big mix of making with what is the major influence.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I lived in Kingston for several years. And I have a few friends who graduated from my arts program. So maybe your age, maybe you will.
Yeah, maybe.
Chat.
Cool. Yes.
Do you ever create your sculptures in situ? What I mean by that, you go down walking on the beaches where all the driftwood is and actually create something to leave for others to see?
Yes. Yeah, it's one of those, and I've got a lot of ideas that I want to do that more often. I go into situ and do a lot of sculptures and I make sculptures and like the reverence the picture of the hanging canvas. So I'll go out. I spend a lot of time on it, so it's kind of innate that I start playing out there. But yeah, that's something I want to do. I've got a bunch of ideas for installations out there. The only issue that I have with that is when I'm walking out in the woods, and even something that's been touched by by man's hand, such as clear cut, I still feel a bit weary of leaving something behind. I'd rather kind of just take a picture. But yeah, at the same token, I mean, I've done it since high school. My friend and I would go down to the beach and make big sculptures with the driftwood and imagine kids playing them in the morning and then the waves crashing them down and all that sort of stuff. So there is something fun about it, but yeah, definitely. Any other questions? Oh, we have somebody online there.
Hi, David. Thanks for your talk. I wondered if you had any thoughts. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it okay? Okay. I wondered if you had any thoughts on how Pliant sort of reacted or changed to being touched by light in the window space of Studio 531, which is a very unique space in that it's like not a controlled gallery with consistent lighting. Like throughout the day, the lighting you know, the light that moves through the environment and touches the sculpture would change. And I noticed you said at the beginning that you really like the images of Pliant at night too, because it changed the mood of the piece. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on like observing Pliant in that space.
Yeah, well, it's what I live in Mill Bay, so I don't get down to Victoria all that much. And I installed it in November, and so it's been a lot of gray days. So I haven't been blessed with actually seeing Pliant with these beams of light. I'm loving it. So it's something that I wish I had more opportunities to take in, because yeah, usually it's in passing. My wife's a performer, so we're down here at night, you know, doing gigs and stuff like that. So I haven't, yeah, seen it in this context in such a beautiful, bright day as today. So yeah, I'm thankful for that. I don't know if that's answering your question, but I mean, light's always something that one thinks about as when you're sculpting, or when sculpting, because of the element of space, and light is always an issue. So yeah, I know that when I was making it in my studio, it cast some pretty cool shadows, because the lighting system that I had was on 2 separate switches. So there would be a point where all the light was coming from one side. And yeah, it's something I always pay attention to.
Can I ask one more question while I've got the mic on? Can you tell us a little bit more about your plan to put, you said that you were going to put Pliant in the forest behind your house?
Yes.
After this, could you tell us a little bit more about that? Have you done that before? Will it sit in one space? Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could talk more about this next chapter for that piece.
Yes, so I have done this before. I've actually got a piece right now that's a cube shape, but a hollow cube shape. So it's got the posts, and then the inside is another hollow cube. So right now, and it was carved out of one big log, so it's quite large, and it's taking up some time in my mom's forest and behind her house, and I'm watching the way that it interacts with the forest. And I've got a game camera, and I've got a little fawn prancing beside it. So it's this whole yeah, it's not done yet. So that's kind of the way I see Pliant. So the base, yeah, I'm going to pop apart and abstract like I did for the frame in 4-found. Then I think I'm going to cut up a block of wood and stain it green, and then prop that up on top of the wood base, or the spruce base, with the white paint, and then the split elements as well. So there'll be a bit of a dialogue there. And then for the top, I'm lucky enough to have a ravine in behind my house that's with a really bunch of mossy covered trees and whatnot. So I actually have to clean the moss off my roof, and you can mix moss with buttermilk and spray it on. So I'm considering doing that to the sculpture. And there's a big old cedar tree stump that's going to kind of situate it within the forest, and I'll put it there and see what happens in it. I purposely not put any finish on it because I didn't want to limit to where it could go. And yeah, aside from, I will admit, embarrassingly, there's a couple of screws in there, but the rest is all made out of wooden dowels. So it's should return to the forest in pretty good fashion. And yes, and I've been paying attention, getting back to what you're asking about light. I know that there's some beams of light that will hit this cedar tree stump in a spectacular way. So I'll just keep my camera on hand and see what I can come up with. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions online? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. I guess a comment that's around light, which is, I mean, we get to be blessed to see your piece in the morning, during the day, and during the evening. So
yes, which
is kind of a treat, and being able to have it kind of posted here. And just I guess just thank you for the work. It interacts really delightfully with the space and the light. So for the, I guess the viewer questioning about the light question. I think it's, as we can see it right now, it's great.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, yeah.
I enjoy hearing about the work. I guess I have two questions. My one question was just going to be about your process, which was, it seems like a very tactile one, but is there drawing or anything else involved in the creation of it, and how the piece was conceived? I was curious about.
No, it's pretty stream of thought, and it's very much about working with what I find within the wood, or of the wood, maybe a better way to think about it. So yeah, I just go. And it becomes an organic process too, because what's not used, because all the wood that's in plant, I have 3 times as much still in my shop drying. That would become something else, and there's always little bits of sculpture that comes from sculpting something else, so then it all just kind of meets together, including my more conceptual work too, because there's a couple of pieces that I gathered from the pile where plant came from that are going to be objectified in a much more theoretically pointed way. So I'm going to incorporate some of like the motifs that I showed in some of my other work to bring out wood's essence that way. So yeah, a lot of bouncy bounce.
Yeah, I get one of the parts of the piece that I really appreciate is the kind of the balancing between the base and this constructed base and the natural element, and it kind of touches it, and it's almost levitating in some ways. That some of the legs are hovering and some of them touch down. So I assume that was kind of an intuitive process of how you working through that sense of balance, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was. That's the tricky part, to get that going, because it comes down to the fact that there was a couple of pieces that could have been. It started out with 2 legs touching the base, and that whole thing could have been blown over with a gust of wind. Like it was very tenuous, as I then had to scramble to make the next piece work, and then from there it just kind of worked.
And I guess the last question, if I can, around the creation, and then also I guess the end of your work, you talked about it, that's also part of the story. That I guess just I don't know, a little bit more about the way that you think about your pieces becoming part of nature at the end, or observing them, or
it's more about problem solving with an accountability.
Okay.
And it also harkens back to the fact that I didn't make art for 10 years, because after I'm done with it, I thought, what am I going to do with this? And as somebody in my 20s, I went, I got this, I got, hop in my car and go camping, right? So, and then as far as planning it out, what can happen with it, it's just about an accountability, and it's something that I'm just now thinking more about, because of just trying to be as accountable as possible. And so I thought about it, placing it in the forest, not as an overt part of its expression, but more just as how I can add more value to it. So it's more fun too, right? Like it's the value added. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting it home. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and watching the light move through the forest, and there's going to be some good beams on it. So
you don't see it taking a life in someone's living room or some other gallery or something.
It's for sale.
Okay.
I've made enough big sculptures that end up taking up space, and to be honest, yes, that's communicating by having somebody take it into their home, but just because that hasn't presented itself, I'm just looking at it as there's room for it to communicate further, because I will get that one photograph with the beam of light, and then we'll be able to frame that and put that into a gallery sometime. And then so it'll carry on a life that way, and the print will be for sale too. So it's about, adding value. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I think a lot of us artists and other artists that I'm speaking with around the place throughout Canada and internationally, a lot of us have come to this point where we're not interested in holding on to things beyond their presentation life. And one way of doing that has been obviously to recycle it in different ways.
Yeah.
And so I really like what you're saying about putting it back into the earth. And I'm curious about your ethics around the painted bases. We've talked about this in the past, where you recognize you can't just throw that away either.
Yes.
So do you imagine Pliant could then, building off Jesse's question, have additional life, beyond, like it could be recreated with new wood or like further salvage wood, things like that, reusing the base?
Well, yeah, the base, I'm actually really excited to get that home too, to come up with that idea of splitting it, opening up the tones of the wood underneath the paint and using a base to make something else. And then that will be an object that I'll hold on to and, apply to some show elsewhere. So there's potential in it all. So, and the base is not that big. So because of what I learned from disassembling the wall at 4 pound, it should come out to something about yay big, and then whatever I put on top of it, which will probably be a green cube. Well, so it's not going to be so big. And I'm at a state in my life now too that I've worked really hard to have a bigger studio. I've got space for a couple of shipping containers, so I'm starting to curate my artistic practice in ways that I haven't been able to do before. So that includes storing them so that a few years down the road, or even 10 years or however long, this sculpture that's going to come from Pliant's base can hopefully have a home in some other venue in some other way. And so, yeah, there's a lot of transmutation between my process and what is static within the moment as well, and the object. So, yeah.
Well, that's great, David. Thank you. We always like to close by just asking our guests what you're working on next.
Yeah.
What can we, things you can talk about? I know there's probably a lot you can go on to yet.
Yeah, so a bunch more proposals are going out in the next couple of weeks, leading to another public art thing that's coming up. I've got another one that is confirmed for the spring, but I still can't talk about the details. So some public art there, and yeah, I want to play. I've been making a lot of furniture, so I've kind of opened up some space where I can make some art. And the big position that I'm in right now is what I was alluding to, is that I've worked really hard to get to where I'm at, and my studio that I just added 600 something square feet with 4 skylights off the back of my shop. That's going to be a painting studio. I haven't painted in 4 or 5 years, and so I've been thinking about that for all of that time. So I'm going to splash some paint around, which again gets into the whole issue that I've brought up with the base and the paint and whatnot. So I have a bit of a difficulty with that, but I kind of have to get over that in order to make some other things, because the paint also bleeds into my sculpture in a lot of it. So the short answer is I'm going to play for a bit before I get smothered with any furniture again. So yeah, I'm in a good space right now.
Okay, well, that was Creative Mornings, IRL. Thank you all for joining. It's nice to see some new faces. You can mark your calendars now. Friday, the 31st of March, we'll have our next Creative Mornings, and the theme will be corruption, which is always exciting to think about. And we've invited Judy Wu, who is a local artist and agitator, to talk about corruption within the framework of International Women's Day. So as Cass had mentioned, next month and the whole month of March, we'll be celebrating International Women's Day through the exhibition, as well as a whole bunch of other weekly events, culminating with Creative Morning. So we'll see you all then.
Thank you.
Right. Right.
So